Hello, everybody. It's time for last Monday marketing chats for, oh my goodness, it's April. How is it
No,
April already? This is
no
wild.
idea. We do
For
that every
me,
month too.
2 weeks to go till the kids are off on summer break. So that's just ridiculous concept.
Yup.
Today we wanted to talk to you about things that AI can do that strip your voice out of your content and how to make sure that even if you're using AI, you still stand out from everybody else by keeping your voice your own.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think we have for a long time thought about the different ways you might want to sound in like all the different things that you write. But I thought it might be worth quickly talking about, Paige, how you got to the point to realizing you needed one voice because you were color. We've talked about this before, but like there are a lot of things you write and it can feel overwhelming of how to write everything. So what was the problem you spotted with all of that?
I think the very first time I recognized it and started really talking to you about it is I had bought a template from someone that I thought was so great. It was like very like fun, upbeat, but it wasn't. I always struggle because I don't like some of the like slangy terms. I don't like extra exclamation points, and so like finding something that like feels funny and fun, but like doesn't go too far bubbly for me was really hard. So I found this template and I was like, oh, this is so great. This sounds exactly what I want to sound like. And then I tried to create other things like, like, cause it had like some things that I needed, but not everything. So then I had to try and match. And when it didn't match, I was like, okay, how do I do this? And you were like, well, do you say Paige like I, or do you say we like Glean and Co? And I was like, I don't both.
Right. And the problem was that when you looked at your emails, the answer was both and not consistently.
Yeah,
and there's
exactly.
Both, but there was no consistency in if you got an email from Glean or if you got an email from Paige.
Yeah. And I very quickly realized that like without writing it in my own voice or in my own words, it was almost impossible to match somebody else's. For me, I'm sure some writers can do that. I'm not a writer. So it was very, very hard for me to attempt to get it to sound like someone else, but also sound like me. And how do I do that? And there's so much that you taught me about like keeping consistency that now when I tell other people how to write for me, like my social media person or the person that's setting up all my new system, I'm constantly correcting them because they don't totally get those things yet. And so I keep having to say, we don't sign off like that. We always sign off like this. And we always start like that. And I can see it now immediately because so much all the stuff that you've taught me to be like, oh, okay. Yeah, I definitely still screw stuff up, but
I think it's sometimes we make little mistakes. Sometimes there's going to be a typo. Sometimes your voice goes a little off because someone writes it for you. But I think that if that gets amplified across 30 emails on your website and a landing page and your sales page, like that's when it starts to feel like, what is this? Do I really want to be spending thousands of dollars with this business? Do I trust this business?
Yeah.
When you might not know why you have this gut feeling that everything's a bit chaotic and not really very like dialed in, but something will be giving away to you that it just doesn't feel quite right.
Yeah, especially I think with photography too, and like trying to convey like what your package includes and what it doesn't include can be very confusing for consumers who have maybe never hired a professional photographer before and are spending a lot more money with you than they ever thought possible. And so trying to be consistent with that language is really important to me now, because it's like for instance, my guy was trying to put together a new booking page for me. And I have on my website, like, this is what's included in our luxury session. And it specifically says catered lunch for 2 from a local Boise restaurant. And he had put light snacks and appetizers in the new description. And I was like, well, that, not that they care that much about the lunch, but I was like, it needs to be exactly what's written here, because I want them to come from the website, see this thing on the website and go, oh yeah, I like the sound of that. I want to have lunch and my photos taken and professional hair and makeup. And then they come to this booking page and it's like, well, wait, it says light apps and like, so is there not lunch? Is this the same package? Like, it gets very confusing very fast when it's not consistent across the board. And so I I don't want people to be like, you know what, I can't, I'm not going to book with them because I have no idea what's included, what's not. Like, I don't know what there is. This even a scam, you know?
Especially if you set up the value because it's a premium service that includes lunch and hair and makeup. And then the next page says light apps and snacks. And then maybe they are like, well, okay, that's not what I thought, but it wasn't really about the lunch anyway, never mind. And then they hit the checkout page and it doesn't have any mention of any food. You're now like, well, what like, are we getting nothing? Are we getting some things? And like, new moms, it's like, should I bring food for our family because we're going to be starving in a 4-hour session? Or like, can I trust that this person's going to feed me? Like, there's so many parts to that I think it's really easy to forget the reader. We think about what we want to say, but we don't. It's really hard to remember, what does somebody need to hear to trust that, you know, that they're going to spend this money on you. And probably quite often you're asking them to pay some kind of money up front. They may not have talked to you yet. In the past, we talked about this a lot, where people would do sales calls with you, but now lots of people just book through text.
They don't want to.
You.
Yeah, and I think that there's other words, like one of the words that he used that I never use, and I was immediately like, no, we can't use that word, is all inclusive. So he meant the session is all inclusive, but in my world and photographers' worlds, all inclusive means all of your images.
Right.
And so if you write, it includes 5 images on one thing, and then on another thing you say this session is an all-inclusive experience, people are going to be very confused. I think that's my own, you know.
Well, I was going to say, especially if they've worked with an all-inclusive photographer before, where they used the term all-inclusive and it meant all their images. This is again where you need to think about the reader. You know that what you mean is the all-inclusive experience, but I am now going to sell you extra images. But can you imagine, as the reader, if you thought this was all you were going to have to pay, like an all-inclusive trip to a resort, and then suddenly someone's saying it's going to be an extra $100, $200 per image, and you're like, now it's going to feel like you're getting less than you thought you were going to get. And I think while you've already got the sale at that point, that person's probably is left with a bad experience where they're probably not going to hire you again. They're not going to recommend you to their friends, as opposed to like where those, quite often that extra business can come from the momentum of a really good client experience. So yeah, a couple of things that I wanted to mention, which was, you may, in the past, you would go and just maybe buy a set of templates from someone. And what you have to remember is they were written for the photographer who sold them. So maybe a copywriter wrote them for them, but they wrote them in that photographer's voice. And I think that's what we don't always think about. And honestly, copywriters who don't do brand voice don't think about that either. So when you saw those and they were really fun and full of exclamation points and really peppy, that's what that photographer hired somebody to write for them. Or maybe they're a really good writer and they just wrote them themselves. But that isn't your voice, and it probably shouldn't be your voice. You should probably not be able to just take a set of templates and they just instantly are you, because now picture, what if 10 other photographers in your area also downloaded those emails? Now you all sound exactly the same. And crucially, I think when it comes to that experience of people learn so much about you online, sometimes they've never had a sales call. Maybe the first time they meet you is when you turn up to the photo shoot. If you're a totally different type of person because your personality came over as all bubbly and funny and exclamation points in those emails, but then they meet you and maybe you're just a little more serious, maybe you don't use the same terminology, maybe you want to get right to the point, and they've had this sense it's going to be a very nurturing, fun, upbeat photography session, and it's far more focused and serious, they're not getting what they expected out of it. So you kind of lied to them in the first set of communications by giving a suggestion that you are a certain kind of personality, or you act a certain way, or you value certain things about the process of taking photos, and you're then not delivering on that at the end.
Yeah, and I also think that it's like establishing who you are and how you're going to work with those people. So like if you're fun and bubbly and carefree in your emails, and then like they come in and you're like, these are my strict policies, they're gonna be like, wait a minute, like, I thought I was dealing with this like fun, easy photographer, and now you're telling me you have these really strict policies. Or vice versa, like you have really strict policies and people are like, oh, okay, like she is not flexible at all. And then actually you're like, no, I'm good. Like, what do you want to do? You know?
Well, and I think we're sort of, sometimes when we talk about this, it implies that one is better than the other. But I think what's crucial is that different people want different things out of their experience. If you see somebody and all of their language is very formal and there's a lot of contracts up front, if you are the kind of new mum who is quite anxious, maybe has been burnt before by a photographer, is in a professional capacity of work where you're used to contracts, that might feel very safe. They've got contracts in place, they're very formal, everybody knows the rules and the boundaries. And that might be who that client wants as a photographer. And then they turn up and you're like, it doesn't really matter, do what you want. I know it said that in the email, but it's fine. Or you turn up a bit late because that's kind of how you are. But you've been very consistent that you must turn up at a certain time, and that's when the client turns up. Then that's not going to work for them either. So this is not like one way of writing is better than another. It's that the way that you write should be a reflection of your personality and your processes and kind of your point of view. So like an example that I like to give about this with you, Paige, is I would say that overall you're an optimistic person, like a glass half full person, but you never pretend that there isn't half of the glass not full, right? Like, let's make the most of what's in the bottom of the glass, but let's not pretend that the glass is full, right? Like, we're not lying about what's going on here. So I think a lot of what you do is say, I know that in the moment of being a new mom, it can be overwhelming and sometimes hard work. But if you zoom up and out, you can see how lucky you are and what a great experience you're in. But in the moment, that can be really hard to do. And you don't like sugarcoat that part. So you don't make moms feel bad that they might be struggling or finding it hard or rolling their eyes because they got up 6 times in the night. And I think that connects to the fact that you create this wall art very specifically so that when people are in the moment of it, they can kind of look at the image and be like, oh yeah, that's right. It helps them zoom up, right? And be like, oh yeah, that's right. And we are actually really lucky, even though it's really hard right now. Yeah. So if someone was to write in that very saccharine style of like, isn't this the most amazing time of your life? Don't let it fly by. You know, you'll regret it if you forget about this later. Like, that's never the kind of way that you would write, or the kind of photo shoot experience you'd have, right? Like if the older siblings are acting up, you're like, that's okay, that's what happens, let's figure out how to get through it and make the most of it. So your point of view about life is expressed in your voice and how you talk about things.
Yeah. So give us your best tips on like, how do you, like, if somebody was like, if I was coming to you and I was like, okay, I don't know what, like, how do I figure out how to write in my, how do I know what my brand voice is? I have no idea.
And I think this can be hard because sometimes, and nowadays we can try and use AI to do this. And I understand why we think, oh, AI is going to be a great solution. You might give it something you've written before or like an email you have and ask it to replicate that. But first of all, like, where did you get that email from? Like, did you get that from a template? In which case it's not your voice. So now AI can make the templates for you. But what was that first starting point it came from? So finding something that you truly wrote yourself. And I think the other thing is that sometimes we feel like we have to be a certain way in business. So even if you wrote it 100% yourself, was it because you felt like you had to be a little bit more formal about it? Or the opposite of that might be that you really want to be quite formal, but there's a feeling that everyone's, hey girl, and this is my Enneagram, so like I better put that in my stuff, even though that's not who I am. So there's often these expectations we have that influence how we write. And we do want to change things up to be a little more polished when you're sending things out to clients. You don't just want it to be the way that you chat with your friends. But the things that we do to polish are to make it more clear, like to make it a little less rambly sometimes, to get to the point, and really to think about that reader of exactly what they need to hear. So let's just say what they want rather than say what I want in the moment. So when we tidy things up and polish, we shouldn't be taking out your personality and point of view. We should just be doing those things, making it more clear, making it about the reader, like getting to the point, really. So the best way I can suggest is that we have a custom GPT that walks you through the different choices that I think about when I'm thinking about the key ways you would want to talk to your audience. So it's things like, are you a studio? Do you refer to yourself as a group of people, whether you are or not? Or do you use I? Like, it doesn't have to directly relate to how you run your business, but you may want to talk in that very personal one-to-one way, even though you have a studio assistant and other kind of assistants, you might still always want to use Paige and talk about it as one-to-one. Or you may just be a one-person business but want to talk about yourself as a studio. So there's different ways you can do that. So Custom GPT walks you through all the different choices that I think about, and it takes you to an end result, which is one of the 12 voices that we have created of the different ways you might want to talk. So it's still not going to be fully personalized to who you are, but once you've finished the GPT, answered all the questions, it will take you to a page on our website that explains, here's what we think your voice is based on the way you answered. And like, there's a whole page of text there. Some of that will really resonate with you. You'll be like, yes, this is how I want to sound. Maybe some of that you're like, nope, that doesn't quite sound like me. And that's okay too. You can tweak, but if you're tweaking from a 12th like line down, that's much better than tweaking from just one template where you're like, how on earth do I change this to be completely more formal when it started out very chatty? So if you just generally tend to that more formal way of talking, the voice that you will pick and then any templates that you buy that relate to that will already be in a more formal voice than another one that you might pick. So the tweaking that you have to do is less, because it should already be sort of structured and generally sound the way you want it to sound. And then you might want to change out wording. You might want to change out the way it's structured, but it should be like 80-90% of the way before you get to it.
Yeah, well, and I think a big chunk of, I think when we first started talking about this, I was like, okay, we have to find all these different ways of like talking like someone. How do you do that for that many different photographers? Like, how could you possibly personalize? And I think the thing is, it's not personalized in that, like, it's not written for Paige. It's not written for Jill. It's written for the type of business and owner that you're trying to be and the way that you want to run your business. So I think that the most important thing in those templates, and I think a lot of times that the thing that's missing from those templates that people buy is the information that the client needs. Like, okay, great, you wrote it in this like fun, peppy voice and you had these great stories and connections and metaphors. Did you tell them how to get to your location? Did you tell them what they need to bring with them? Did you tell them, you know, like how this like timeline of your day? Like all of those things are like, that's what the client needs. They don't need some like fancy story. And so the templates are broken down by like personality a little bit, but a lot of it is like, these are the things you're going to need if you're running that type of business. And this is how it could be structured. And then you can go like, now I can take that template and go, okay, I'm Paige. I have 3 boys. Let me tell you about my experience as a mom, and like add a little blurb at the top that like no one's going to be able to ever write that except for me. I mean, maybe AI could kind of get close if you put your whole thing in there. But a lot of times it's like, you still have to do that work. You still have to like add who you are. But if the meat of what you need to tell your client is there, then it's like, it's so much easier because you're like, okay, I've already told them what they need to know. Now I can add just a tiny sprinkle of who I am and it's going to feel much more like me.
Yeah, I think that's what's crucial, is that the 12 different voices have every email across each of the 12 voices. So, and it's a workflow. I think if you just get one template from someone or you get an email in from somebody, you think, oh yeah, I should write an email like that. But what's important is, and this is why I always think about the reader first, what does your client need to know? And like, how many times do you need to remind them? How early in the process do you need to tell them, this is my address, we're starting at 10, lunch is included. So like, make sure that you've got your baby up in time. Are you going to feed when you arrive, or would I like you to have fed before you arrive? Remember that your client doesn't generally know any of that stuff. You are in control as the photographer, and it's your responsibility to tell them. Now, if you're fun and peppy and you don't really like to get into details, download the fun and peppy ones, but they will have all those kind of like boundary setting stuff in them, all the things the client needs to know. But you can say it in a nice, kind voice. There's a difference between like expectations and boundaries and being clear with your client, and then like how your personality talks about those things. And so the baseline of all the templates is everything your client needs to know. That's the workflow, the flow part of flow and format. And then the voice is the formatting part. Is it full of exclamations as we talk about it? Is it long sentences or short sentences? Like, that's when we get more into the detail of how you would sound. But bringing up AI, I think that's one other thing we should talk about, which I see a lot in my business working as a copywriter and specializing in brand voice, is I see a lot of people talk, and I also edit books. And so I've been seeing this in the book world a bit as well, where people say, well, I wrote it myself, it's my voice. but then I got AI to tidy it up. And their feeling is that they're tidying up the grammar, they're tidying up that structure stuff. Like, is it clear? And I think what people imagine is it's stripping out the unclearness and just replacing that with grammar that is more clear. But in fact, AI is stripping out the grammar and your voice. It's keeping the content of the thing you told it you wanted to say. It's changing the structure of the sentences. And if any, I mean, probably everybody listening knows some of these. I am knee deep in it, so I see a lot of it, but I'm sure you will have seen a lot of, it's not X, it's Y. Like the way that things talk about something, it's a quiet something, or there's like lots of different phrasing that we know is what AI puts in. It's AI structure and not your voice structure. And you might think, if you ask AI to help you and it comes out with it and it's changed it to that, it's not X, it's Y. Don't do this, don't do that, just do this. Like there's a lot of those kind of rules of three that happen. And you might think, well, I don't really mind that it said it in, it's not this, it's not that, it's Y. But what you're forgetting is that somebody else who goes to look at 3 or 4 other photographers' sites or emails 3 or 4 other photographers, like as they're trying to figure out who they're going to use, if everybody's stuff has gone through AI, then everybody's is going to sound like that as the reader reads them. They're going to be like, wow, this one sounds the same as this one, sounds the same as this one. Oh, here's somebody who genuinely sounds like themselves. And they're going to be more drawn to that person because beyond just the basic details, they're also getting a sense of their personality and who they are as a human. So I think my worry with thinking that AI just fixes around the edges is that people don't realize it's stripping the voice part out as well. And I think as photographers, you probably know, even if you don't see that in the AI writing, you probably see it in examples or in photography where people use AI to try and fix things and you're like, oh, I see what they're doing there. So yeah, I think you probably all know examples of where you've looked at something like that and thought, I know this is AI.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. I definitely think that AI can it's easy to think it's making it better, and you're like, oh yeah, even like to like editing and stuff, like, a lot of me too, like I'm using Evoto AI now for a lot of my skin editing, and it's easy to go too far and like kind of pull it back and be like, well, no, that's not quite natural anymore. Like it's not what that person really looks like. When you fix everything, you've lost those individual qualities, and I think it's the same, like what you're saying is like, okay, yeah, it cleaned everything up and it made it just like this perfect package, but is that perfect really? Like it's actually like lost all of those unique things.
Yeah, and I think the other thing to think about that is, as a photographer, as an expert with this, you can see how far to go with the editing and how to manipulate it to get it to the right point. As an expert in words, I can sometimes use AI to help me write certain things because I know when it's using those things that are just, they're not human, and everybody does it. It's, everyone uses AI is coming out with the same thing. So I think there's a difference in your business in using AI on things that you're an expert in, so you can spot where it's getting it wrong. But if you're not an expert in writing, you don't spot where it's getting it wrong, so you're not as aware of it. And I think it's fine to use AI for some of the parts of your writing as well, right? Like if there's an unusual email you weren't expecting to write, or you just quickly need to get something out to somebody, then use AI to help you figure out what you want to say, that's fine. But I think this sense that if everybody is doing that, the way that the AI tools figure out is that they don't actually figure out what you're trying to say. And this is a big problem I have with it because they sound human in the way that they talk to you. We can't think of them as human. We call them, Claude, and we give them names and we really humanize them and treat them like they're a person. But in fact, all AI is doing is looking at the statistically most likely next word that will come after the first word, right? So it's just, here's the most likely next word and here's the most likely next word after that. And so it's always writing to the middle. Which means that every person's AI is going to be picking pretty much the same word, pretty much the same construction. If you ask it to help you write for your photography business about how a certain process works, it will pick generally the same words as your competitor who asked the same question. It's not going to be identical, but it's going to be close enough that that's all going to feel the same. So starting from a place where your voice and your personality and how you work and what's different about you as a photographer, that's immediately going to be more obvious in the writing than if everyone's just got the same thing. It's like if you all used a really basic template website and everyone got one template to choose from, then everybody's photography websites are more or less going to look the same, and people's eyes are just going to start glazing over. They're not going to know the difference.
Yeah, it's like I went to my son's 4th grade science fair the other day, and I convinced him to do something that was not on the list of, you know, like, here's some things you can try, but like it just had to be about energy. And I was like, let's do something outside of that, bud. Like let's find a way to make this fun and different. And I laughed because he did this cool watercolor project about energy and stuff. And when I walked around the science fair, it was like, here's an electrified potato, here's an electrified potato, here's an electrified lemon, here's an electrified potato. And it was like,
right. And I know what that means is how like cool that electrified potato was. The fourth one you saw, your eyes are glazing over. You're not really paying attention because you've already seen many variations of it. No matter how hard that kid worked, if they happen to be the fourth one you saw and not the first, then they're going to lose out as a result of that. But if they've done something completely different, not just a lemon instead of a potato, then that's where someone's going to perk up and be like, oh, what's this one about? This is different. And I don't think we're talking about being different for the sake of being different, but thinking really hard about what is it the way that you work and why you do things the way you do. So that, like, your point of view on why are you a photographer? Why is it important to you that people have photos? You know, like that same sense of like, what is it you want people to feel when they see their photos on the wall? Not just the general normal answers that people give, which is what AI would give if you were to ask it, but like, how does it really feel to you? Like, what is the reason? And if you give a clunky answer to that, that's maybe not the most like grammatically correct and professional version of it, people are going to be so much more interested in it than the overly polished answer. That, like, one other thing I want to tell you that AI does that I think is really important that I see more and more people doing is it uses a whole lot of abstract words. And I don't want to get into the details of the difference between abstract and concrete, right? Like that's a whole language lesson that we don't need to get into. But if you think about it yourself, so like an example that I see a lot in marketing is we talk about, oh, this is going to convert. This is going to convert. But like, what does that mean? So we use the word convert, but it could mean different things to different people. Does it mean you get 20 sales calls in a week, right? Like, actually, it would be terrifying to me to get 20 sales calls in a week because I cannot do 20 projects in a week. Does it mean that 4 people are going to DM you off your Instagram image? That would be something I would be interested in. That would potentially be like but I can also picture what 20 sales calls looks like. I can picture what 4 DMs off my Instagram looks like. I can't picture what convert is because it's like it's a brain word, it's an abstract word, and it's not like a feeling embodied word, which is where you can actually picture the experience happening or you can sense it in your body. So AI goes really easy to the abstract because it doesn't know the specifics of anybody's business, so it has to generalize. If you can talk specifically about you and how you work and why you work that way and what somebody gets from working with you, you're like head and shoulders above everybody else who's using AI to try and write for their business.
Yeah. Well, and in a world where it's like so easy for people to compare by price, you have to find a way to stand out. Because if you don't have something that someone can connect to in some way, then they're going to go to that like investment link that you got there, and they're going to look and they're going to see all these potato experiments, and this one's $12,000 and this one's $1,000. Like, they're always going to pick the cheapest one because in their mind, they're all potatoes.
Right? Why not get the $1,000 one when it comes to two potatoes that are doing the same thing? And as a non-photographer, I have to say that taking good photos is a baseline. So you might think, well, they'll see my images and that will persuade them to buy. But I'm going to tell you that when I go and look at photographers' websites, everybody's images look good. Like that, I cannot distinguish you all by your images and if somebody's images didn't look good, they're off the list. It's not like, oh, they're on the list, but they're at the bottom. If someone has bad photos, they're off the list. I cannot really tell the difference between like one amazing photo and one quite good photo, realistically. So
I mean, I think that's the biggest problem too, especially with newborn photography, because as newborn photographers, particularly superposed newborn photographers, they see all those little things. You know, they see if the hand is like laying flat and you can see all the fingers, or if it's like curled up and squishing the baby's cheek, or the ink, you know, like all those little details that we look at and go, well, that photographer's work is not as good as mine. Clearly, like that, like, of course she's $300 and I'm 3,000. Like, look at the difference. And we feel that,
I don't,
but your average consumer doesn't. And so unless you can find a way to like teach them about the experience, or like, I don't know, it's honestly, that is one of my biggest, like, okay, how do I convey this to someone, like why I'm worth more money, you know?
Yeah.
Because it is like, it's not about your image, unfortunately. Like, it is to an extent. You have to have good images up there, but the difference between a photographer that has, you know, those like curled fingers and the one that doesn't, the average consumer can't see. So you have to find a way to communicate via your words on your website why you're different and how you're different, and like, what are you going to do for them?
And part of that might be that you make the mom and the baby comfortable. So like maybe the best image that photographer has is the curled hand, but they have a ton of weird looking crying babies as well that they don't have on their portfolio, right? And that's maybe the risk you get if you hire that photographer. So then you have to explain that. You have to talk about the fact that you make the mom feel super comfortable, that the baby's super comfortable, that you're like, the whole experience is set up for you to take the best photos you can. Maybe you need to hint a little bit about the fact that sometimes if you're in a bad experience, you will not get great photos out of it. Like maybe you have to give a little hint at that risk that's involved by hiring a less professional photographer. But again, this all comes down to words. There's nobody's going to put their worst pictures on their portfolio so that someone can compare that.
No, but I think that the way that those two photographers are different, say, is like, I might have the baby with like the hand kind of crunched, because my own sales point, like what I want to tell people is that I practice baby-led posing. I want that hand to be perfect. Don't get me wrong. I know that it would look better if that hand was like that. And I want to be able to go out of those poses, but I will not spend 5 hours with a new baby that's not wanting to do it just to get the pose. It's just not, that's not the experience that I want to offer my clients. And so I want to convey to them, we're going to get beautiful pictures of your baby no matter what. It's going to be a quick session. I'm going to get you in and out. You're going to be so happy. You can go home and rest. Whereas somebody else that's like, their perfectionism is so important to them, and that's what they've like focused on their whole career, and they pride themselves on that. Their words are going to be about how like, we won't give up. We're going to get beautiful images of your baby. You know what I mean? Like there's no right way about that. Obviously, like I like my way better for me, but that doesn't mean that the perfectionist isn't right too. It's just,
and that's where, again, thinking about the reader, right? So like, if as a new mom, if it was very, very important to me that the pictures were the best they could possibly be, no matter what, then I will be like pulled towards the language of the person who says I will work at this no matter what. And I will know what, like, there's an implication in there that the sessions might go long. You might even talk about the fact these are long sessions because we don't stop till we get the right image. And then if I am more just, I'm going to have the images on my walls, they're just like, they're images that I'm going to keep on my phone to look at, and I feel very overwhelmed in the moment, then seeing that it's going to be fast and quick and everyone's going to feel comfortable and we're going to be out there and done before we know what would be more attractive to me. So this is why the process is really important. If you're the person who takes a long time, you don't want the mom who can't really be bothered to sit there for ages and won't maybe do like some giant image of the picture that they're going to share with everyone because their expectation was not some objectively good photo. They're just looking for a great photo that reminds them of the time that their baby was that age. So what you do not want people who are going to push you to like get the hand in the right position. And if you were to have a client like that, they would end up, even if you got a good image, they're maybe not going to have to feel like they had a good experience in the moment at the photo shoot, which I think is another thing that photographers forget, is that it's not just about the images, it's about how you make them feel in the moment. And so if you attract the wrong people, they're just not going to have a good time, even if you've created good images for them.
Yeah. Well, and you feel the emotions behind that photo like long after that session's over. And so it is very important that what you're doing for that family. I mean, and like I say, like you could have a 5-hour session, but if you're taking really good care of the mom during that whole time and the baby's like, you know, being taken care of and they feel like, oh my gosh, this photographer worked so hard and like really took care of us. And it was like, it was a lot, but like, I'm so glad we did it. You know, like that's different than, oh my God, it was 5 hours and she didn't even tell us it was going to be that long. And then we were sitting there hot and we didn't know what to do and there was no food. And you know what I mean? Like, so
really, and for sure, I
both.
have one example of this, which is so funny. I have some images in my dining room that Paige took of my boys when they were little. My youngest was probably 2 or 3, and there are images of them at the bike park, and they're great. I love them, and they were probably taken 8 years ago, I'm going to guess now. So they're a lot older. Every time I look at those pictures, it reminds me that my husband was not there for most of the time because some guy fell off his bike and it had to get taken to hospital. And my husband had to like help him get off his bike and sat with him until his partner came. And that's all like, it's fine that he did all those things. But every time I look at the images, I'm immediately transported to that memory that it's an 8-year-old memory, which possibly if we had just regularly gone to the bike park that day, I would never remember it even happened in our life. Every time I look at those pictures, I can feel like the sun and where it is in the sky. I have such a perfect memory of him going to help this guy who really hurt himself on his bike.
Yeah. I mean, all of those things like stick. And I think that's why it's so important to create that like really great customer experience. And that's what people recommend you for, because when they look at their photo of their baby and they're like, oh my God, like, look how cute he is. That was such a good day. Like, I can't, you know, like, I can't tell you enough about how wonderful it was. Like that person is talking about it.
They're not saying, look at this great photo. His hand is so straight on his cheek. They're saying, look at these lovely photos. We had such a great time.
The photographer gave us so much information in her emails and her communication that then when we came in, we knew exactly what was going on. And like, you know, like
the opposite of that, if someone has had a bad experience with a photographer, if they're not going to recommend you, it might be because the images are bad, right? Like there's a possibility of that. But more likely it's going to be, that was so frustrating. That was so stressful. I can't believe we ended up sitting there for 5 hours. Or I can't believe she rushed us through in 45 minutes. You know, like it can go in either direction depending on what the person wanted. But if someone's complaining about you as a photographer, it's probably not your image that they're complaining about.
No, not usually. I mean, I think every once in a while I'll get people that'll be like, because I have a thing on my questionnaire that says, have you ever worked with a professional photographer before? Mostly because if they have other kids, I want to know, did they do newborn photos for the first time? And if they did, how did that experience go? Because sometimes if they've had them in Boise, like, why are you not going back to the photographer you hired the first time? What happened? I want to know what those stressors are. I had one lady called me one time who went to a very, very popular, very expensive photographer here. And she said that she at no point told them that they would maybe be there for 5 hours, and her husband was pissed. And I was like, yep. And there's nothing wrong with a 5-hour session if you've communicated that that's what the expectation is. Just like any other choice, if you're going to be like super quick and somebody thinks it's going to be 5 hours and I've gotten you out in an hour, they're going to feel like they got ripped off. Like, wait, I thought she was going to take pictures for like several hours. She only spent an hour with my baby and then sent us out the door. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
get from that. And it may take a while to get the images. So in between, are they worried that they're not going to get the images out of the result of it? So there's that, like, it's not just in the moment of the photo session, but it's also the time until their images get delivered where they're concerned.
But I mean, like on that question, a lot of times we'll get somebody that says like, well, we kind of hired a professional. My aunt has a really great camera and she took some pictures for us and they're okay. Or, yeah, we hired somebody, but honestly, it wasn't the best experience and the photos are just fine. And you're like, okay, well, who did you hire and what was their process? How far along in this career were they? You know, there's different levels. I always talk about how like it drives me crazy to tell anyone I'm a photographer because there's no like barrier to entry, right? Like anyone can go buy a camera and decide I'm a professional photographer. Like someone paid me $20 to do a photo shoot. I am now a professional. And it's like, okay, it's like somebody saying I'm a cook versus somebody saying I'm a chef.
Well, and I guess with writers too, right? You only need a laptop.
Yeah.
But And it doesn't mean you've had the training. And I think that's where like both you and I have been through a lot of training to do what we do. And you can be learning. Like it doesn't mean that you have to have got to a certain level of experience, right? But there is there's different parts to the business, and one is the craft and learning the craft well, right? But then there's also the customer experience and how they feel, and then there's the selling part, and that's hard for everybody, the selling part. And so that's about how do you make it clear and upfront that you're the right person for this job, especially when we're service providers, and how can we trust you? So how to make you feel like you're the right fit, that does come down to the personal way you talk. But if you say that, if you put that out there and it's riddled in typos and it's not quite clear what you meant, then you lose that trust. And like, can I trust that you're the right person for me? Even if it's a referral from someone, like if you say, oh, I got some great images taken, let me give you the photographer's name. And then they go and check your website and they're like, what does this say? Who's this about? Then you can lose trust at that point before somebody goes to call you. So getting the balance right of being clear about who you are and keeping your personality and voice in there, but also being consistent and professional. By professional, I don't mean formal. Like you don't have to have a formal voice to be professional. You can have a super cheery, personality-laden voice and still be professional. But like that's where people get the trust to hire you, and especially if you're going beyond family and friends, which is where we go up to that next tier of your business, right? Then you have to be able to show that professionalism and have people trust you. And that's just based on your words and images out there in the world.
Yeah. Well, and I think that as we started this conversation, it's all about like consistency. And I think a lot of times people think, okay, I need my website to look amazing. I need to get people in my door and I need to get them to hire me. Yes, you need all those things, but you need them to have a good experience too. And that part after they've hired you to the time that you're done and whatever comes after you're done is so important too. And if it doesn't match, if your website promises all these things and then your communication afterwards is not the same, you hired somebody to do your website and it's beautiful and the copywriting is perfect and like it's so great. They hire you and then they get this kind of half-assed email that doesn't really make sense and wait, what happens next?
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest part of what our templates do is that workflow of okay, how do we communicate the information that these people need? And at what point do they need it throughout the client journey so that they can have a great experience? Right. Now, you can do that in a very strict studio, here's my contract kind of way, or you can do it in a, hey, I'm Paige and welcome to Glean & Co. kind of way. But they follow the same steps. You're giving the clients the same information because they need the same information, depending on, if you have an all-inclusive business or you have a business like mine where you're sitting down with them, they still need to know all the same things.
And we should say that our templates are set up for those 3 different selling styles. So if you are in-person sales, then you will get the bubbly version, the professional version, all the different steps, but they then will be tailored for that sales process. And the same if you have all or digital. So know that the whole flow of what you need from beginning to end is in the one set of templates, and then it has that extra level of voice on top of it. And the one thing I would say is when you talk about the fact that you had a client who had been to a very high-end, good local photographer and then didn't have a good experience and came to you next, that's the difference. They didn't go back and hire that person for their second photo shoot because they didn't have a good experience, because their expectations of what was going to happen didn't match what the photographer explained to them, right? And so it may have been a good experience for someone else. It doesn't mean it was an objectively bad experience, but they had no idea what they were walking into. And so that's where those client communications allow you potentially to have that person come back and hire you for their second kid.
Yeah, I think you need to be able to convey what people are going to feel. And if you can't do that, or you don't do a good job, they're going to fill in the blanks for you. And if they're wrong and their expectation is different than what you delivered because they were never given what to expect, that's where you end up with the bad experiences and people are upset. They don't like what they figured out, and I think this is the same thing with pricing. I used to not do as good of a job as I do now of explaining everything up front. And then I would get the clients that came in and they were like, well, wait, what do you mean?
Mm.
And you're like, oh, okay. And I can feel that annoyance, like I feel it in myself. I mean, like, God, these people didn't read anything, but like, it's not their fault. Like when something goes wrong like that, it's not on the client, it's on you as the owner. Like, where did I go wrong in my business? Where in my communication that I frustrated this person and they made an assumption that was not correct.
And there's always going to be the odd time that a client doesn't read anything. You've sent it a million times. They've confirmed they read it, but they didn't. But if you're consistently having people say, wait, hold on, what's happening with the pricing? Like if that happens more than 2 times, you have not communicated it to them clearly enough, right? And so there's putting to the side the odd one where you were just, there was no way that that person was going to understand the process. But like, if you're starting to go, oh, it's probably because you've had to explain it in person more than once. And do the heavy lifting of that in your emails. And the other thing is that when you're clear about that in the email, you can use that same language in person on phone calls. When they arrive, can we just double check that you understand how this is going to work? And then you've got a whole way of talking about it already set up that you've used in your email. And that's, again, consistency. It's giving them exactly what they expected because they've already hopefully read it one time, and it's just a reminder of what they've already read.
Yeah. And if you can hopefully you can have a conversation with them in person, but you can also have those emails to back it up. Then you have like that extra layer of protection where you can go, remember we discussed this? Remember, here it is in the email. Here it is in the second email. And then it's not on you. And you go, you know what? I tried. You can't win everything.
Yeah.
But
all right. Well, I think I'm really interested to hear if anyone tries the GPT to let us know how it goes. Let us know what voice you got and if it feels like you. And then if you get the templates, let us know what tweaks, if any, you have to make to them. I think probably because the process is laid out, some of the tweaks will be just really easy logistics, like, oh, our templates, because they're based on Pages Business, say that we provide X. Oh, I don't provide X. Well, that's real easy. Just take it out. Or I provide Y instead. Okay, replace X with Y. Like those are super easy changes as opposed to going to a blank page and being like, what do I give them when they come in? It's like you can just change out things that are not relevant to you to things that are.
Yeah. Yeah. It's meant to be super easy. So yeah, I definitely would want to know if somebody was like, wait, I need to change a lot. Like, nah. Should be very easy, plug and play.
We will listen to our customers. If that happens, we'll change up the templates and we'll send you new ones. Exactly. Excellent. All right. Well, we're moving into the summer session. It's coming fast. I know that summer, depending on where people are, well, I guess newborn photographers maybe a little less, but for you, summer is starting to think about your fall sessions, isn't it? So
yeah.
Maybe we'll be
starting to get those things booked. I had someone reach out the other day with an October baby, and she said, well, it's pretty early. And I was like, well, actually, I've got several October babies booked already. So it's one of those things that, it happens fast. And I like to fill my calendar with as many babies as possible so that then when we get to the fall, I'm not as stressed about families. I don't want to rely on families. That's just me. But I think that if you know what you want, let's fill those calendars with what you actually want, and then use our templates to keep them very happy after they've booked you.
Definitely. I love it. Excellent. All right. And we shall see you next month.
Bye.